Boston, Massachusetts, made only a few guitars, but they are today considered to be some of the finest Archtop orchestral rhythm guitars ever made in the history of the instrument. The label in these instruments reads Charles Stromberg and Son. It's actually CHAS period Stromberg and Son. But the fact is that the guitars were in fact made by Elmer Stromberg, the son, and Charles apparently did more drum making early on. Both of them died, father and son both died a few months apart from each other in 1955. The guitar making started in the early 30s, about 1932, and none of the guitars have been found with a serial number below 300, and the highest number is in the 650s, so that there really weren't much over 350 Stromberg guitars ever made. And of those, the early ones today are not as highly regarded as the ones from about 1940 onward. The early ones, this being an example made in the 30s, feature 3-piece F-holes, hole, slot, hole, rather than 1-piece F-holes, and the tops and backs on these instruments typically are arched and pressed rather than truly carved. And these have multiple top braces. Diagonal, they have the tone bar, treble bar, and bass bar, but also cross bars, which the later ones have only one diagonal bar running this way, which gives a really woofy, great bass, and for chunking rhythm chords is amazingly good. The later ones have carved tops and carved backs rather than pressed, and have only one brace versus the multiple braces that this guitar has. This is a good sounding guitar, but it doesn't have the power of the later ones. Plenty good guitar, but not the power that we see here in the circa 1940 Master 400. This is also a huge guitar. This guitar is about 16 3/8 wide. This guitar is 19 inches wide, a humongous guitar. This is a guitar that will drive a big band rhythm section. And this is the kind of guitar that players like Freddie Green with the Count Basie Band used. He had a Master 400 and a Master 300. The Master 300 had a little less ornamentation, but it was the same size and shape as this. They also made a series of other instruments, deluxe model, which was 17 3/8 wide, and they had some cheaper ones, a G1, G3, G5, but they were lesser models. So the upper level model Strombergs with the one diagonal brace are exceedingly rare, and generally considered to be as fine an orchestral rhythm guitar as ever been made in the history of the instrument. Certainly something of interest to collectors as well as musicians. One of the most noted today who's playing Stromberg guitars on stage is Ranger Douglas B. Gruhn, Riders in the Sky. He has been a Stromberg collector for many years, and the primary guitars he uses on stage with the Riders are Stromberg Archtops. And there are no others that sound quite the same. This is the sunburst finish and has the early Master 400 peghead inlay versus this, which is a plastic multi-laminate engraved and painted. But interestingly enough, the plastic veneers used on the peg heads of the 30s tend to be very durable, whereas many of the ones in the 40s into the 50s tended to deteriorate and sometimes literally crumble to dust. This is one that was made later in the 40s, Master 400. This one was Oscar Moore's guitar. He was a famous player. And on this one and this one, both of these pick guards are replicas. The original nitrocellulose tortoiseshell grain plastic deteriorated. And this is a problem not only on Strombergs, but on many D'Angelicos and Gibsons and Epiphones, that these plastics that they had no idea would be chemically degradable turned out that they were degradable with about a 40 to 50 year time fuse. So during the lifetime of most of the original owners, the pick guards gave no trouble, and the designers and manufacturers of these guitars were not expecting this problem. In 1970, when I opened my shop, I hardly ever saw any instruments with deteriorating, decomposing pick guards or bindings. But today, we see this problem with remarkable frequency. Most of the Gretsch guitars of the 1960s have white bindings on the body that are cracking and deteriorating. A high percentage of the D'Angelico guitars with white bindings have deteriorating bindings as well as deteriorating pick guards. Pick guard is expensive and time-consuming to make, since they have binding and they need to be precision made. But it's a whole lot easier to make a pick guard than it is to rebind the body. Rebinding the body without damaging the finish is quite an art, very time-consuming. It's an expensive job. This guitar here has fine condition bindings, no problem there, and this peghead veneer has held up quite well. But we've certainly seen other Strombergs that ended up needing a complete new replica peghead veneer made because they simply crumbled to dust. And you can still play old-timey Carter family style, it'll do it. But what players who bought these were doing. They were doing often chord rhythm where every couple of notes was a new chord. They were doing some very complex, difficult music. But these guitars are ideally suited to driving the rhythm section of a band. And they were designed in a day when people were not using pickups on an Archtop guitar. It was an acoustic setting. And Count Basie was not featuring electric instruments in his band. Freddie Green was playing a Stromberg with high action and heavy strings and lots of rhythm chunking chords. It's a whole different sound and a different concept. Today, most people who buy Archtop guitars are buying a cutaway, and they'll have a floating pickup on it, and they barely have to just noodle around on the strings, picking it very, very lightly, and the pickup does the rest. And that's still a very valid sound. It's a good sound, but it's not the same sound. For rhythm orchestral playing, or playing the way Doug Green does in Riders in the Sky, this is the ideal guitar. Nothing beats it.